Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Lowdown by Analysis.tech. And this is a little bit of a special episode. John Reimer, do you know why this is a little bit of a special episode?
Let me think, because we have as our guest our former colleague and our good buddy, John Bratincevic, now Director of Platform Strategy at Zoho.
That this is all true. And he is joining us for our 100th podcast.
Oh, wow.
Ah,
Yeah.
didn't
That's
know.
like a big deal in the podcast world, right? Most don't make it to 100. So, yeah.
very
So,
cool.
yeah.
Well, John, we're really thrilled to have you. We've been, as you know, we've been hounding you for months and months and months,
Shamelessly courting him.
to come and join us. Rob and I worked with John at Forrester. I was able to work with John for about 6 months before I retired, and we had a great time. We threw packaged apps under the bus, and we had a great time. We had a lot of fun. And it must be said that when I decided to retire, I didn't tell anybody, but I knew I was going to retire, and I set about figuring out how to get John Bratincevic as my backfill. And Rob helped me, and we figured it out. As I think it's one of the best hires Forrester ever made, and period, full stop. So I just have always respected John's pragmatism, but also he's and analytical thinking, really, really strong. John, we're thrilled to have you on to talk today about where AI is driving application platforms and development in general, software development in general. You're in the thick of this, so we're really happy that you were able to join us.
Thanks,
Rob?
guys.
Hey, John, we always like to start off these things. We think there's a great deal of credibility that can be gained by asking people where they came from, right? There's always some of the stories are really interesting. But it's always interesting to find out how people found their way to this place in their career. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Maybe something we wouldn't have known?
Sure. Let me see. I was a music major. I was going to be a musicologist before I decided I didn't want to be poor. So I was going to teach music history. And the only job that was available to me when I got out of school was in logistics. And I did that for a while. And then something happened where there was a big problem with this company I worked with, a massive supply chain problem that was going to make their stock price drop. So I was resistant to it at the time, but I rolled up my sleeves and wrote an application using a platform. I think that was before the term low code was even coined, but it was basically an early form of low code. And the problem melted away and the stock price didn't drop. And I got all these thank you notes from like professional crisis managers that had been assigned to the problem. And it just was solved. And they ran that whole operation on the app I wrote for several years. And that was like drugs because I felt like I discovered this magic I could do. So the next thing I did was I went and I did work in the oil field for the largest oil and gas largest company in the world at the time, and replaced an Oracle system myself by writing this large operations suite that managed fracking and water and trucks and all sorts of things. I did that entirely myself and supported it and maintained it. And sitting in my basement without writing a line of code is the way I kind of sum it up. So after that, went and started a consulting company with a friend of mine, and we combined process improvement consulting with application development. And we did that over, I don't know, dozens of industries in all sorts of countries for several years. And over the course of that, I met you two. And then, as you said, I was recruited to take your job, John, which I didn't know when I accepted. I thought you were still going to be around helping. It was kind of a surprise to find out you were retiring.
Hey, John B., there is a relatively common theme of coming from a background of music.
Mm-hmm.
As you're building applications, Does the way your brain is wired up as somebody who loves and learned a lot about music, does it aid in solving these types of problems? It just keeps coming up that music majors build great software.
Yeah, a lot of people have made that observation. I think for a certain kind of musician, a certain kind of software person, there's this idea of kind of structure in a system, right? And harmony, and it works together and it builds on it. And there's also an art to it, right? Because you're creating something and it works. So definitely, I've met a lot of people like that. It is definitely a thing. Again, the mix of art and architecture, I guess, is the way to look at it, is why it attracts that kind of person. The liberal arts developer, liberal arts programmer, I think is what you used to call
John R., over to you.
So let's start, John, with the impact of vibe coding on platforms. You and I got together a month ago or so, and you said something to me that I just can't get out of my head. Um, you said that if Anthropic builds Claude code using Claude code, then anything is possible with Claude code. Anything. You could build any digital thing, and actually with 3D printing, maybe you could build anything using Claude code. What does this do to platforms?
Well, you kind of have to separate out the platforms in the sort of abstract technical sense from what they're usually associated with, which are specific apps and specific products, right? For a narrow business use case, sometimes a big business use case. I hold to the thesis that I've been talking about for years, which I've shared with you many times, which is kind of standalone dumb apps that do CRUD and workflow, which is much of the software world, are going to have a hard time because those are pretty easy to make now. I've heard it expressed as the era of shallow software is fading, and I think that's about right. Because that mode is just evaporated. Where I think there will continue to be value for software, and again, we've talked about this many times, is in areas where there's a lot of risk and regulation and complexity that changes. So you're basically offloading that risk to somebody else. And we always go back to accounting and things like that, tax codes. And we've used these examples for many years. So on the application side, which is sort of, separate from what's built on, a lot of that I feel like the value is collapsing and has been collapsing for years. I totally agree with that thesis. So if you're in the dumb CRUD and workflow app business that doesn't have a regulatory moat, I think that's a very hard business to be in. On the actual platforms the software lives on, I think they're going to have a harder time too. But I still hold to the thesis that to really effectively harness AI, like with a Claude or anything else, for most businesses, you need a menu of components, and you need a language that knit it together, and you need hardware, and you need a runtime, and you need SDLC process, and kind of knitting all that together with AI doing things in an intelligent, engineered way, it seems for the foreseeable future still has value. And but tools like Claude or whatever can help make and maintain those things for the customers of those products. I've seen nothing that has dissuaded me from that yet. So I think there will be a much greater emphasis on platform engineering and making all the components and abstractions work together with AI across the whole SDLC. So, like we wrote about a few years ago, you can basically generate applications, and the amount of inspection required is minimal because so much of it is taken care of by the engineering behind the scenes, right? You put AI in exactly the right place for the SDLC.
Right.
Um, that's great. Um,
You called out components.
yes.
Um, I think I'm come to believe that components really are the key here for a lot of companies, because otherwise you're just generating everything from scratch all the time,
Mhm.
and not everything has high value, um, to high enough value to be generated out of whole cloth, every
Mhm.
time. Am I crazy?
Well, there's debate on that, right? Like Carpathy will say we should generate a lot more stuff from scratch, right? He's posted to that effect a few times, and you can understand how he's logically extrapolating there. And to be sure, we even components themselves are sometimes bloated, and sometimes they come with vulnerabilities, especially they're open source, and there's a whole debate around all that. However, how they all fit together is different, right? The architecture, knowing what the pieces are and generic ways the pieces should fit together and having that be consistent, again, and engineered, is a complex problem. So AI can help with all these things, but pieces that you can trust, I think, have value. And in general, I think if you look at what a platform is going to be selling, trust is a big part of it. And that takes a few different forms. But it's basically like, okay, maybe we're generating software, maybe we're making apps that use AI inside them, whether you want to call them agents or there's different patterns or whatever. But can I trust the foundation I'm working with? I'm not going to get in trouble or screw something up or have a vulnerability. Like that's still, I can't see that ever going away, honestly, right? Like even Claude's going to be selling trust, right?
Right, right.
It's not about which vendor survives or which one, does the best job on it necessarily, but I mean, you're going to like work inside of something to do this.
So there's multiple paths to getting to that vision, John. I want to drill into that just a little bit if we could. So I want to go back. I want to roll the clock back about what 2-3 years ago. You were gracious enough to bring me into some research that you were doing around this concept of unified apps, right? I think that was the term you used. Unified. We're
Application,
bringing it all together. What'd you call that?
application generation.
It was very close to this concept that's now I think maybe trending towards being called unified apps. We don't know what we're calling these things anymore, but it's the platform, it's the model, it's the things you're talking about coming together on a foundation that you can trust, right? And Zoho recently announced AppOS. How close do you get with AppOS? This is actually going to be a two-part question. How close do you get with AppOS? Are you fulfilling that vision that you saw with that research years ago?
I think it's a really important first step for the company. Basically what it's doing is it's taking a lot of products and unifying them. That's basically the idea, same backend.
Mhm.
So there'll be a shared object model and, you know, set features that every product has. Right now each product has to add its own features, right? So, but this way the platform will update the features and all the products can have them. And there's a lot of emphasis in it on AI in the SDLC, right? So moving towards generating applications on that foundation. And as you know, you've dug into this yourselves, but having the context of all the different applications and the business to feed both design time work, like generating apps, or runtime work, like agents doing things, is very important. So the more breadth you can have to do that, the better. That's why the whole industry is focused on consolidation right now. So AppOS is basically a big engineering step to take a bunch of products which have certain things in common. They have integrations and they have certain shared things, but really rewriting them all kind of the same way if they fit that, front end workflow pattern, which is a lot of our products.
I mean, this I think is the crux of where the market sits right now, is in understanding this exact dynamic. Because I could do that through best of breed. I could do that rolling my own, right? If I'm a sophisticated enough shop,
Hmm.
or I can do it through a platform. And I think people will take different directions. What are your customers looking for in this?
Well, the sort of sweetheart customer for Zoho really isn't in the best of breed. And I don't think that's super unique because best of breed's been sort of under pressure for several years, right? We wrote about that before at Forrester.
Sure.
And it was sort of like the least bad option, right? You basically go with, a bunch of different companies and a bunch of different architectures and a bunch of different apps. And you try to knit them together with integration. Integration is not the same as working with a unified platform. But it was just seen as so hard to develop your own or take a platform approach. And there was this idea of all this domain knowledge that's baked into apps. And we've talked about this many times. Like generic domain knowledge is not readily accessible. In the SDLC, in the IDE, right? You can say I want an app that does these things, and boom, you can get some generic cut at it. So it's a lot more obvious, I think, to people now how things can be consolidated onto a platform, and that was happening even before. But going back to your question about Zoho customers specifically, the sweetheart Zoho customer is really focused on value, right? So when we sell these gigantic packages where you get 50 different, applications for like one really low price, and we're integrating them better and remaking parts of it like I was talking about, um, I mean, that's kind of what they want, right? Because they want all that value in one place. And if we engineer it correctly, even better than we have, it'll get a lot closer to that ideal.
Well, and arguably, arguably, if in a world where they can create anything, they can generate anything, um, you want a common back end. You want
Yep.
as much as you can. You want common back end services because they just exist to serve the functionality that's unique to you, hopefully, that
Hmm.
you're providing. So it's a value play at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yes.
To
The
consolidate.
three things, I haven't really refined this in a public way, but the way I've started to think about it and talk about it internally to kind of,
Well, you're about to.
yeah, we'll try it out. Kind of the three things that I've centered on. I'm not sure if the list is quite right, but it captures it decently well. That like a platform company, a software company needs to have, or one, governance, which we talked about many times, and I know a lot about builder governance from the Forrester work, and obviously it's a bigger topic than that, but that's a big part of it when you're making and changing things all the time. Second is this idea of context, which isn't just information. There's a whole rabbit hole there that everyone's getting their brains wrapped around to make AI work and then control it, I would add. And then third is this is where it's kind of a little too broad, but guaranteed execution, right? So you know it's going to run, you know it's going to work, you know it's not going to break, you know it fits together in a certain way, and that could take the form of pre-built engines or just or having good deployment or whatever, right? Like it's sort of like the can I govern it, manage the risk, see it all, see the permissions, automate certain things in an effective way, and that gets more and more complicated as more AI and agents are injected into everything. Can I provide and engineer the context necessary to make all the AI work, whether it's design time or runtime? And then can I give pieces and foundations that you just know it's going to work and you don't have to worry about it, right? Again, that category is a little broad. I should probably refine it, but to me,
Right.
those are kind of the boxes to check for a software company.
Right.
Though one other, I'll just shoot this out there. Um, I suspect a lot of really good software companies are going to move more towards atoms and hardware, basically combining their software chops with real engineering problems, right? Because that's probably where more of the value will be. And people have been talking about that for years, and we need more innovation in the physical world. But if you just in the bits and bytes world, especially just in the apps world, and the value of that is diminishing, then people are gonna have to get into, you know, atoms, harder stuff, real world stuff more and more, I
Interesting.
think, and then combine that with those platform values, right?
Interesting.
Hey, folks, if you like what you're hearing, if you want to get the word out, help us get the word out to some like-minded folks, hit the like button, hit the share button. We'd love to get more folks who are thinking about these things, listening and talking about these things. If you like these types of topics, there's a ton of research, very easy to find on analysis.tech. Go to analysis.tech, give us your email. Tons and tons of research out there on this topic. Over to you, John Reimer.
All right, John, you mentioned runtime. We've been talking mostly about AI as a development phenomenon and develop set of development features. Let's switch over to runtime. Obviously, Zoho has a lot of applications. Zoho, among software vendors, I think, is fairly unique in that it has decided to invest in its own LLMs and to invest and basically create its own, AI backends, if you will, its own, its
Mhm,
own software there. Not too many people doing that.
mhm,
Um, but there's still a lot of doubts or questions really about the best use of AI, of these probabilistic algorithms in business applications.
mhm.
A lot of talk about agentic, and it's pretty vague. What are you seeing out there? And how do you guys think this is going to play out? I'm really curious what the highest and best uses, in particular you see for AI in the runtime, in the business applications, and where you think it's going to go. And more importantly, what you think are bad ideas.
Let me see. So, the sentiment inside Zoho, and I agree with this vigorously, is that design time is a better place for AI than runtime. Not that there isn't value in runtime, plenty of value, but generating code that's cheap to run and verifiable and runs the same way every time is a better use of AI in general than doing things probabilistically as a business standard. Um, so in general, what we see there, the way we're building and the way we think about it is, yes, there may be use for AI in runtime, agents doing certain things, but then which of those can be turned into code that runs the same way every time and is cheaper and verifiable and so on. So we're architecting around that. What I think is wrong with the way the industry looks at a lot of things, and I think it's gotten a little better in the last few months, but it's still pretty common, is anthropomorphization, which you've heard me rant on that before, is not only philosophically objectionable on AI, but it also, I think, at least a bad architecture. Meaning, when you think of using an LLM as, well, I'm going to create something that replaces a person, that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Because people were never the ideal way to get things done anyway. It was just, you threw imperfect people to accomplish tasks imperfectly, and they had a collection of them, and it's like, it was never the best way to do things anyway. Um, the best way to engineer it is uh, find, I call them squishy verifiable tasks. Squishy meaning maybe the inputs aren't completely engineerable, you can't control them, and there's some judgment or inference or decision making that happens. And then the output from that can be verified in some way to raise the quality, right? Like code works really well for this. There's a reason for it, because it has to compile and you can run all sorts of scans and tests against it, right? Um, so basically narrowing AI in on things that are squishy, verifiable tasks is kind of the way I put it. And what that means is the ratio between code and AI is mostly code, and AI only in places where that fits. Now, there may be a lot of places that do that, but it's not one for one with a person. And it's not necessarily the same processes and interfaces, way of doing things that people did, right? Like an employee would do. You can't just pluck an employee out and stick an agent in. Like, that doesn't make sense. What it means is you're going to be engineering systems and processes where there's these points where those things happen, and it's very appropriate to have an LLM do it and call tools or whatever. So my cutesy way of putting that, both they have a philosophical connotation as well as philosophical connotation, as well as kind of imply the architecture is AI is a capability, not a colleague, right? You're going to engineer systems where there's certain points where AI does a thing and it does it well and you can control it. And there's probably lots of points you can do that in systems, and it'll probably have a lot of value. But it's very different than just replacing people.
It's interesting that it corresponds. Rob and I, way back when did this research on hollowing out of organizations, and it was really about it really started, Rob, with with an as I recall, an IBM speech talking about AI replacing people. And when we did the research, what we found was that it's very rare that technology, it was really automation replacing people, not specifically AI. But what we found in the research is it was very rare for automation to replace actual job roles like people. And it was
Mhm.
what would happen is automation would replace tasks or skills.
Right.
And I think what you're saying kind of correlates to that.
It does. It's just another category of task, right? Tasks we couldn't get at before because you needed a person. Now, if
I
your whole job is just doing that one squishy task, right? That's a little different, right? Like I remember even a couple years ago, it was insurance claims would come into this big insurance company and they would have to be routed, right? And it wasn't like an absolute decision. You just decided which team got it, but like you had to read the email, look at the attachments, and look them up in the system. And it's like, okay, you can probably automate that, pretty well, right? But
Right,
that's not most gigs.
right, right.
Well, it's a scale issue too, right? So I think, John, the if I remember correctly, the real derivation of this was IBM saying they weren't going to replace jobs with automation, that it was just going to make people better at their jobs. And we said, if you can cut 30% out of the jobs of 100 people, you're going to there's going to come a time when you're going to get rid of 30% of those people, right? So
That's probably true. Like,
and now that's the lead story, right? So we were at a time where we had CEOs who were getting up and saying, we're not going to replace your people. We're going to make them better. And now they're saying, we're going to replace them, right? And we're going to save you money
Although
doing
that's
it. You're
come
just going
back
to buy tokens from us.
that has
Um,
around a bit, though, hasn't it?
I mean, we've become a much meaner business environment, I think, much crueler business environment than at that time. But hey, John, we all kind of have this shared background in, citizen development, right? in and you know, in the liberal arts programmer, right? That you solved a big problem, right? You solved a big complex engineering problem in a supply chain without being a coder, right? And I think this all led us to this shared vision of, democratization of software development, software becoming the expression of a company. Is that what a wise man once said? Did I get the quote right?
Software is an expression of the business.
Software is the
That was the
expression of the
tagline.
business.
Yeah.
We never really got there with just low code. Is vibe coding going to break the logjam? Is this going to become a world where business people are really driving the expression of the business and IT is more in the business of keeping the lights on and making sure nobody goes to jail?
I mean, some companies got there. They didn't necessarily get it for the
Some
whole,
did.
they got it for,
Shell did. We had Shell on the show, but we always talk about Shell, and it's like,
well, it's because
okay, Shell is who else? If it's not successful, there must be someone other than Shell.
no, nobody cares about like going and telling people what they're doing, right? Like it's more than just that. I beat on this for years. The data and like data from vendors and stuff, you could tell there were at least a couple hundred companies doing that at that scale. They just didn't talk about it. But certainly it wasn't universal. Sure. It was like steadily growing. And we always said it was going to be a many-year kind of thing.
Is
Um,
Vibe going to make it grow much faster?
I think so for sure. I mean, I've been further democratized, right? Like I've been doing stuff with Claude Code that I never did before. In my case, it's less software development lately. It's more like data tasks, right? But I mean, it's stuff I would have been hard for me to do before, right? I could just say, can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And boom, it works, and you check it, and so Um, what I have not learned how to do is code yet. And I think that's still the gap and the barrier. And I kind of alluded to it earlier, which is I still hold to that thesis. You still need platforms with interfaces and abstractions and guaranteed quality to bring the great unwashed, I say that to be funny, but most people in, right?
I agree.
Um,
I
and
think we agree
yeah,
wholeheartedly.
Wholeheartedly.
so regular code generation will definitely democratize. I can do things I could never do before. I know it's only going to get better and I'll learn more. That's a portion of the population. Another portion of the population, won't want to go as deep as I have, right? And they'll need the tools and the abstractions and all those things we talked about. And AI will smooth out the curve and generate stuff and do things they couldn't. And we'll be able to govern it better because squishy governance problems will also be, more verifiable through LLMs. And yes, absolutely, there's no question about that. You can see that anecdotally with people starting businesses where they're writing software. You can see lots of people like us who are out there doing things, we could not have done a few years ago, right? Just where the tools are at right now and us doing it in addition to our day job.
Very cool.
So
John R?
I absolutely do think that, yes.
Yeah, and the other thing is the velocity, John, is so much faster.
Mm-hmm.
So, we used to that was the really the primary motivation for adopting low code was always you could get software built faster.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like insane. It's so fast.
It
Uh,
is.
I was at a conference last week and I gave the vendor who did the conference some feedback and I said, it's features, feature, 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 but what does it all mean? There's too many trees, not enough forest.
Yeah.
And the response was, well, we're generating features so fast. We need to, and so there's so many of them. We need to inform our community.
Yeah.
And at some point maybe you need AI to sort of, sort it all out. But that seems to be an aspect of this too, is that business people can really pitch in and really tackle very, very everybody's business is changing really fast. It changes really fast.
I think AI's taste still cannot be trusted and judgment can still not be trusted. It's very, again, useful for generic things, even the latest ones, useful for generic things or doing what you ask it to. But knowing what to ask for, I know it's a generic comment. Knowing what to ask for is still extremely important. Having the judgment to put things in and not put things in is still extremely important. And you know, I'm sure you're very on top of this, but there's the sort of generating the code or the configurations or whatever, and those are all the other steps. We need to get all the other steps right to really get the real velocity, because I think it's getting bogged down. I can make something, but all the other stuff is not fully figured out in most cases. Obviously, a lot of engineering teams are figuring it out, but that's not normal, right? They're more advanced. Um, I think we're going to get a little velocity fatigue, meaning, okay, we can bend the bits and bytes the way we want, who cares? What should we do? So just in general, one thing I've been thinking about is like marketing speed, I think is going to become less important because speed is going to be much easier. Code is going to become much more commoditized, but taste and design and strategy and figuring out what you're doing and why and for who and really making it work perfectly and selling it. And that's going to become much more important than just the, can I make a thing?
Outcomes?
Yeah.
Maybe we're gonna really focus on outcomes? Oh my goodness.
Well, certainly that's been mentioned a lot, right? You're basically
Yeah,
billing for a business outcome versus the machine that provided it,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Hey, I love the conversation. I knew I would. And I hear in this conversation, you've got a very nuanced view of how AI is going to play out here for vendors and how it's going to affect their businesses and their business models and all that. I mean, the idea that AI will lead to conventional code that will always do that's deterministic, will always do, reliably do the same thing. I mean, that's really interesting because I think a lot of folks are going all in on AI and saying, no, 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 everything's going to be AI. And the result of that, of course, is massive token usage, which
Mhm.
is a business model thing. Um, the idea that there's this you still hear sometimes this idea that each one of us is going to have a team of agents that we build and work with, and that generates a lot of tokens and all that. That's going to generate a lot of token fees and all that. I mean, how do you think the business models will actually evolve? I hear you being very realistic, which is refreshing. But maybe you could sum it up.
I mean, the business model questions are hard ones. I will say that vision of fleets of agents that work for you is that anthropomorphization thing, which I do not like. Again, that's like I'll have these little imperfect digital people doing tasks for me, and I don't think that's good systems thinking at all. Right? It's a system or a collection of systems where there are points where AI does stuff, not little digital people. I think that's just a bad way to think about many things. I won't say all things, but many things. So agents are just software. I think software will evolve where there is still value in buying software. The code will be generated, and then there will be points inside the software that AI does things. I don't think you'll be hiring agents. That doesn't make sense to me for most things. The differentiation will be whether you can provide that context and that governance and that guarantee effectively and have a broad platform that can do the things you want. And I think it'll shift more towards bespoke. Like, how effectively can you give people the foundation they need to get that bespoke, intelligent operating system that's kind of changing all the time? That's your specific thing for your company. Like, that's the thing, right? And then, as I mentioned, I think people will move more towards harder engineering problems, intersecting software with atoms, right? Because yeah, shallow software isn't going to be where all the money is anymore. It's either going to be really sophisticated systems that are, very organic and change a lot and have intelligence in the right places, or it's going to be getting into other kinds of engineering that intersect with software, and then there's new value to provide there.
Well,
It's not like wholesale agents.
there's a whole lot of software companies that I would not trust to do that hard engineering. This
That's
is not
correct.
who they are.
That is correct. Yeah.
Hey, John Bratincevic, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank
How
you.
does our audience find out more about what you're doing over there at Zoho?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, we have social.
We can get someone from the marketing department, I guess.
Exactly. Someone from the marketing department. I'm more on the what do we build and what do we call it side of things. Um, there's Zoho.com. There's all sorts of things there, and we have social media presence. I honestly didn't think about this question. I don't know.
Sorry, I threw it at you. If you live in their area, look at any bus or billboard because Zoho is very,
Yes,
very well represented, and there'll be a call to action there.
that's true.
John B., thank you so much.
Thank
It's
you so
always a
much.
Thank you.
pleasure to
Thanks for having
spend
me.
time with you, and thank you so much for sharing your insights with our audience.
Lovely chatting
Thank
with
you,
you.
John.
Take care.